Henry George, Progress and Poverty, an inquiry in the cause of industrial depressions and of increase of want with increase of wealth. The remedy. Dive into the fascinating world of Progress and Poverty, a book by Henry George that uncovers the enigmatic relationship between wealth and poverty. Explore vital topics revolving around an increase in wealth, but a simultaneous rise in poverty, often the result of unfair distribution and land monopolization. Discover the meticulous process of labor, value, and capital generation along with how wealth is distributed in various forms such as rent, wages, and interest. Delve into the impact of railways and land speculation to fully comprehend the economic and financial disparities shaping our world.
The inequality of wealth and poverty. Despite technological advancements, poverty remains a persistent issue worldwide, and the wealthiest nations often have the highest levels of deprivation. This problem cannot be explained by the current political economy teachings, which overlook a crucial factor. Wealth is defined as anything with exchange value, derived from labor and natural resources. Capital aids labor in creating more wealth, and land value is an essential factor in determining wealth distribution. The more wealth a nation produces, the more its rent on land property increases, leaving less for wages and interest. Thus, poverty persists even as prosperity grows. The American Dream. During the 19th century, the western and midwestern states of America provided fertile ground for settlers hoping to build better lives for themselves. With cheap rents and an abundance of land, pioneers could keep the fruits of their labor, allowing them to earn higher wages and amass a fortune. To them, owning a little plot of land was the ultimate symbol of prosperity, a stark contrast to the poverty in major cities. Moving west represented an opportunity for individuals to achieve their own version of the American dream. Landlords Capture. As settlers occupy all available farmland, cooperation becomes necessary for improving their welfare. With time, towns spring up, and individuals specialize in different trades while merchants and others establish stores, medical, and postal services. Agricultural practices advance, and population centers develop trade advantages. However, concentration of land ownership into fewer hands leads to landlords raising rents, which captures most gains from the progress of the community. This leads to a downward spiral of rising rents and extractive wealth that induces poverty, as seen in New York City in 1879. Railroads only exacerbated the problem of speculative rent advances that hinder normal production increases. The misconception of the conflict between capital and labor. The belief that capitalists exploit laborers and that interest on capital results in the robbery of industry is a common misconception in society. Many fail to distinguish between the active return on investment and passive income from rents and debt repayments. In reality, capitalists who provide tangible assets for wealth creation are just as vulnerable to the whims of landlords as laborers. The economic progress of the American West was driven by capitalists who risked their capital to build railroads. However, some railroad barons engaged in unscrupulous behavior like demanding bribes, colluding to raise rates, and extracting monopoly rents. In contrast, rent, which is not spontaneous from land, belongs to the whole community and not just landholders. The corrupted democracy. When a small group owns valuable land in a growing region and wields economic power, democracy becomes corrupted. The poor, although having political power, lack the ability to vote independently and may follow extremist politicians. History has shown that unequal distribution of wealth ultimately crumbles civilizations. The young U.S. Republic, despite having political aspirations, adopted the same attitudes towards land ownership as the Old World, leading to economic inequality. In anticipation of railroads, land speculation led to U.S. recessions in the 1870s and worldwide economic decline. Speculative land values often pave the way to economic depressions. Evolution of land ownership. A journey through the historical development of land ownership in civil societies, from the ancient Roman civilization to the California Gold Rush. Property rights have been a defining aspect of civil societies since the dawn of time. The evolution of such rights has been intriguing, with different civilizations advancing different forms of property ownership. In ancient Rome, political economies were based on landed estates. When the Roman Empire collapsed, feudal societies emerged in medieval Europe. The feudal system involved lords owning land and peasants tilling it, with both parties possessing specific rights and obligations. The lord received rent from the peasants but had duties and obligations to supply justice and defense, assign land parcels to tenants for their productive use, and take care of the sick in their community. In this way, feudal landlords paid directly for various aspects of their society's needs. This feudal system established the idea of the common right to land. Contrastingly, the California gold rush of the mid-19th century saw a different approach to land ownership. To forestall the locking up of natural resources, a policy emerged that no single individual could purchase large tracts of land containing gold. Instead, prospectors were only allowed to stake a possessory claim of a specific size and work on the land. Rules, set district-wise, determined the size of the parcels and what constituted working a claim. The state then confiscated abandoned claims, allowing no one to lock up natural resources. Land ownership has tremendously evolved over the ages, with different civilizations advancing different systems. The Roman civilization owned landed estates, while medieval Europe was governed by the feudal system. The California gold rush gave birth to the staking of possessory claims. As different societies arose, so did different land ownership systems. Land tax solution. The book proposes a solution to the issue of monopoly rents without disrupting society and landowners. Nationalizing all land would cause massive disruption and moral dilemmas. Instead, the author suggests taxing land, as the profit from monopoly is in itself a tax on production. The land tax would replace all other taxes, and the small homestead farmer would not be worse off. Additionally, the new levy would result in lower land prices and discourage land speculation. The proposed tax pertains only to the land's location value, not the buildings or improvements on it. Just taxation. Land value, as primarily determined by the community, should be taxed to benefit the community. Private property is a cornerstone of modern society, but it is not an inalienable right since it requires protection and support from society. The value of land or property heavily depends on its location, access to commercial links, transportation hubs, and community. Thus, landowners benefit from the community's efforts and developments, and as such, the community deserves fair compensation from them. According to the author, a land tax is the most equitable and just tax as it solely applies to those who derive valuable benefits from society. Such a tax system deploys the community's right to tax land rent, which is influenced by an area's interactive property value that, in turn, is the creation of the community. Put it simply, the community enables the growth of an area, which increases the value of the property. Therefore, the community's wealth should reflect the land value growth. In conclusion, the private property rights provided by the state's protection and support should not be exploited at the expense of the community. By implementing a land tax system, value created by the community is rightfully returned to it. Taxing landlords. The book advocates for a tax on landlords' passive income, which would not harm the productivity of the economy. A tax on consumption, labor, and profits has several adverse effects and punishes those who contribute to society. Taxing landlords' rent would draw down their monopoly income, decrease corruption and evasion, and deter the exploitation of tenants. The book uses the settlement of the American West as an illustration to show how taxing rents can reduce inequality.
In conclusion, Progress and Poverty unravels the complex dynamics of wealth and poverty, ultimately attributing it to unequal distribution, monopolies, and the negative impact of land speculation. The central theme of this work exposes the paradox of growing wealth, subsequently widening the gap between the rich and the poor. To remedy these issues, George proposes taxing land value, which he argues is the most just and equal tax system, ultimately leading to a fairer society. By comprehending these critical insights and their implications, we can work towards fostering a more equitable world.